I will now request our chief speaker today, Professor B.P. Agarwal, to give his address. Let us give him a hand.
Indian Humanist Union, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am grateful to the Indian Humanist Union for giving me this opportunity of speaking on a subject which has become extremely relevant because of what is happening in the whole world today. The subject given to me was humanism and international collaboration. Sometimes we feel that we are living through a world war because of the violence emanating from a certain ideology which is seen everywhere in every part of the world. Everybody has heard of the First World War, the Second World War, and the Cold War, which can be characterized as Third World War, and the current war, which we don't realize it, but is a world war. Why I'm saying it is because now I made a list of the incidents which have taken place since the attack on United States in September 11, 2001. So you see, you have attacks taking place practically in every part of the world. October 2002, Indonesia. October 2002, Russia. March 2004, Madrid, Europe. September 2004, Ossetia, again Russia. July 2005, London, 52 dead. Then November 2008, Mumbai, 166 dead. March 2014, 148 dead. December 14, Pakistan, that was Pakistan. January 15, Paris. March 15, Tunisia, Africa. Then April 15, Kenya, about 150 dead. June 15, Tunisia again, and southeastern France, 38 dead. July 15, Turkey, 31 dead. October 15, Turkey, 95 dead. This is Turkey is in both Europe and Asia. October 15, Egypt, 224 dead. You know that Russian plane which took off from there. Again, November 2015, Beirut, 43 dead. Paris, recent attack. Pathankot, India, recent attack. And practically every day there is an attack. In this situation, can we really live in an ivory tower and talk of human rights? I looked up the dictionary of humanism. I looked up the dictionary for the definition of humanism. That's the Webster's New World Dictionary. And this definition is almost similar to the one of Oxford Dictionary. And the word was actually the product of a particular time in history. That was the result of the intellectual and cultural secular movement that stemmed from the study of classical literature and culture during the Middle Ages, which are also described as Dark Ages. That was the Christian Dark Ages. Now we have a different problem from another religion, but I'm going to the genesis of the word humanism, and was one of the factors giving rise to the Renaissance in 15th century. And this obviously, and this was followed by the Reformation. So this whole genesis is the result of the dark ages of Christianity. But this sort of thing has happened again and again in history. Ancient Greece, Stoicism was a reaction to the degeneration caused by belief in so many gods and goddesses. Actually, Greek mythology, as you know, is very rich in gods and goddesses. They are a rival to Indian mythology. In fact, when I was ambassador in Greece, I remember one evening, the Dutch ambassador told me at a dinner that Greece is our mother, but India is our father. What he probably meant was that in terms of culture, because Greece is considered to be the cradle of European civilization, but they recognized that there was an older culture and civilization as rich as Greek, or probably richer than Greek. In fact, the Greeks never thought much of Indian culture, and they always have a slight complex about it. In India, after the centuries of Sanatan Dharma and Brahminism and its excesses, degeneration, you had a reaction in the form of Buddhism. Then, of course, there was a reaction to Buddhism also, because Buddhism also led to certain degeneration, because sannyas became the order of the day. No, not karma. Work is not important, sannyas is important. That is how this famous book of ours, the Bhagavad Gita, was born. The story of the Bhagavad Gita is very old, but the book itself is very recent. You see, the classical Sanskrit in which the Bhagavad Gita is written didn't exist till about 4th century BC, and it was developed up to the 7th century AD. The Vyas Rishi and some of his disciples and others saw the degeneration in Indian society caused by a misinterpretation of the Buddhist ideology. Buddha never meant it that way. But you see, he was born in 6th century BC. And even Emperor Ashoka, who adopted Buddhism in 3rd century BC, 300 years after him, had not heard of the Bhagavad Gita. Apparently, the book was not there, or at least it was not well known. His grandfather, Chandragupta Maurya, they were both emperors. If the book had existed, they would have known about the Bhagavad Gita. But this book itself was a reaction to certain degeneration, and practically every chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is a kind of answer, is trying to answer somebody. And the main one verse I can quote to you, Sannyasa karma yogascha nishreyas karo ubho tayostu karma sannyasat karma yogo vishishyate. And it literally means the sannyas and karma yoga both are good for you, for your welfare, but out of the two, karma yoga is superior to sannyas. And this is the theme of every chapter in a different way. In fact, the Bhagavad Gita is only one of the Upanishads, and it says so clearly at the end of each chapter. So, for example, at the end of 3rd chapter, it will say, At Shri Bhagavad Gita Su Upanishadsu, At Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su Upanishadsu, Brahma Vidyayam, Yoga Shastre, Sri Krishnarjun Samvade, Karma Yogo Nam, Tritiyo Adhyaya. Like that, you have the title of the chapter at the end of each chapter. So I'm mentioning this because there is a kind of misconception that Bhagavad Gita is the spoken word of Krishna. It is not, and it cannot be, because Krishna lived 5,000 years ago. According to Indian tradition, according to Western scholarship, he lived 1,000 years ago. And the language itself in which the book is written did not exist at that time. So this kind of reaction has happened again and again in history, in ancient times, in Greece, in India, twice. First against excesses of Brahmanism, then against some degeneration resulting from Buddhism. And in Europe, it happened in the form of Marxism after the degeneration of imperialism and capitalism. Today, you see, most of the religions were born or developed between the period between 7th century BC and the 7th century AD. Why I'm saying it? Because Islam is 6th and 7th century AD. Buddhism, Jainism, Zoroastrianism, and all this have developed during this period of 1400 years, 7th century BC to 7th century AD. Judaism existed earlier and Sanatan Dharma existed earlier, but their main development took place during this period. There is another period of 1400 years from 7th century AD to 21st century AD. Now this 1400 year period has seen great revolution in sciences, in knowledge. You have a whole list of scientists of the scientific revolution. Copernicus, Galileo, all these people, plus of course Darwin in biology, and of course Einstein, and now space travel. People have gone up to space. But here I would like to quote something from Plato, the ancient Greek scholar. He said, we can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light. What he is implying is that we as adults have failed to, this happened in the Greek times also. Socrates was himself given poison because his revolutionary ideas, his scientific ideas, his humanism was not acceptable to the Greek people who were living in the world of the gods and goddesses. So what has happened, what is happening today in this war of terrorism in the whole world is the result of non-application of the light that has come to us in the 1400 years after the era I mentioned, the 1400 years of development of religions. So this is where the problem lies. Now can there be humanism without our ability to fight this ideology which is fueling the war in which we are living and the protagonists of that war? These are two major challenges. First, we have to fight the ideology, the radical Islam, which, you see, all these terrorist incidents I mentioned are from radical Islam, which is also given the name Wahhabism. Wahhabism is the extreme form of Islam which advocates that you cannot, you have to live by a certain code and you have to die by that code. Whereas there is another school of Islam which is closer to Sufism and which is not so dogmatic. They are not involved in any of these terrorist attacks. And there is now more or less a coalition of certain forces which are perpetrating this world war today. In the Middle Ages, they had a study of the classical literature, and that gave rise to the Renaissance. And then was a Reformation. Then Christianity, which at one time the Pope's office used to give a certificate to heaven on payment of a certain amount of money. That sort of thing is now happening in another faith. So the humanity has faced the challenge again and again, sometime through one, sometime through another source. So you have to identify the source of our problem today, the main challenge to humanism. And there are two challenges here. One is the challenge of the ideology. You have to defeat the ideology. And one is the actual physical force, which you have to defeat and eliminate. This brings me to the previous wars. You see, the First World War happened because Germany was not happy that it did not have colonies. It was unhappy that it did not have colonies, whereas France and Britain had colonies. And that was the main issue on which the First World War was fought. Germany was defeated, and the war was fought between 1914 and 18. But after, you see, the one world war creeps into the second. In the First World War, after the defeat of Germany, certain penalties were imposed on Germany. Reparations, heavy reparations were imposed, and Hitler won elections on the plank that he will get Germany freed from those reparations. And he added to it certain other grievances, like he believed that the Aryan race to which the Germans belonged was purer than others. The swastika was their symbol, though it's an ancient Indian symbol, but he adopted it as his symbol, and the Second World War took place. There, an ideology was born that was called Nazism. And that ideology had to be defeated by physically defeating Germany and its allies completely. His allies were at that time Japan, Turkey, mainly it was and Italy, Mussolini. Mainly ally was Japan, fascism of Japan, and Nazism of Germany, and of course Italian fascism of Mussolini. So the world had to actually physically come together to defeat that ideology. And 1945, that happened. But that end of that war already gave birth to a third problem, because the Soviet Union, which was one of the allies of the democratic powers, was a communist country. And it became a world power. And it felt that it could perhaps impose communism on the whole world. So it created an organization called Comintern, Communist International. And their whole goal was to convert the whole world to communism. That is why they came to China in 1948. Mao Zedong became an ally, and these two powers, and then there was the Cold War. So from the Second World War was born the Third World War. And the Third World War lasted almost 45 years, from 1945 till the fall of the Berlin Wall, and a little after that, till Soviet Union disintegrated. Of course, there was another factor in the end of the Cold War, and that was Mr. Gorbachev. He was a product of the Soviet system itself. there was an implosion within the Soviet Union. So the Second World War, the Cold War ended the prospect of communism, but it is not over yet, because you still have China, which formally is a communist country. It has a one-party system, and there is, of course, North Korea, and there was Cuba till the other day. It still is there. But although China's economy has changed considerably, it has become capitalist economy. But can a capitalist economy and a communist political system live together? In history, there is no example other than that of Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany was a totalitarian government and a capitalist economy. I was also in Bulgaria, where the president, Mr. Zhelu Zhelev, had written a book on fascism, and he gave me a copy of his book. And he told me at that time that it's quite possible that China's journey to democracy from communism may be through a phase of fascism, because warlordism has been in China. Before communism came, it was ruled by certain warlords when the empire broke up in 1911. So that is one possibility which is in front of us. And then the other force that has emerged is radical Islam. These two forces are enough to make the world wake up and line up a coalition, as happened in the Second World War. But will the world do it? President Obama was in Iraq. In fact, he was there because President Bush had invaded Saddam Hussein, whom he considered to be a threat to world peace. And Obama fought the election on the plank of bringing back the troops, because the Americans were tired of body bags. So he actually pulled out the American forces in great hurry from Iraq, even announced a timetable. See, when you are pulling out from a battlefield, you don't tell the timetable to your enemy. But that's what he did. At that time, when the American forces were in Iraq, the Arab Spring had started, taking advantage of the American presence in Iraq. You see, in Germany and Japan, American troops stayed for 30 years to make democracy irreversible. And here, they pulled out in a great hurry. At that time, when the Arab Spring began, it first began in Tunisia, then came to Egypt, then to Syria, and at that time on the internet there was a spring revolution even in China, in the sense people from China were writing in favor of democracy. So I was trying to explain how one world war has crept into the other, and the scenario today, and the need for the world, how the international, what is the need for international collaboration to meet this new challenge? Can this ideology be defeated without defeating its proponents? This is the big question. I think I should leave it there, because I have more or less made it clear what is the challenge before humanism.